What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and it must be an exceedingly slow news week as we have what appears to be some collusion between Kotaku and Vice to put out literally the same article and a slanderous piece about Mortal Kombat 11 in the same day. Of course, they take aim at Ronda Rousey in Mortal Kombat 11 as if that's a complaint now, even though we've known for many months that Ronda Rousey is in Mortal Kombat 11. And if you want to write an article critical of Mortal Kombat 11, you could talk about the awful PC port. You could talk about the awful politics in the game. You could talk about the awful grind, which has since been somewhat alleviated as players were paid off with in-game currency. You could talk about the awful microtransactions in the game. You could talk about endless topics if you want to ride the Mortal Kombat 11 hype train to write your articles, but instead you choose to write a terrible, incorrect, lie-filled article about Ronda Rousey and Mortal Kombat 11. Why? Because you're dumb, apparently. This is one of the worst timed, worst takes I've ever seen in my life. Now, if you want to criticize Ronda Rousey's involvement in Mortal Kombat 11, you could critique her voice acting skills. You could critique the fact that it was clearly a PR stunt for both people involved, which you could qualify as a win-win, but there's no real reason Ronda Rousey's voicing Sonya other than both people getting some nice clout out of it. What's wrong with that? But nonetheless, you find exactly the same article on Kotaku and Vice, or Waypoint, basically, on the same day, complaining about stuff Ronda Rousey has said and apologized for almost 10 years ago. Ronda Rousey being in Mortal Kombat is total BS. Ronda Rousey, trailblazer, UFC Hall of Famer, WWE star. Oh, I forgot a couple of her compliments. She shared an inflammatory video one time in 2012, and she made, now let me get this correctly, trans, misogynistic, and outright asinine statements about transgender MMA fighter Fallon Fox. Now let me tell you the truth about this. Apparently, the only people that don't believe in biological advantages in sports are people that have probably never played them. Most athletes in the game universally agree that someone who was a man for all of their life biologically and decides at the point that they feel more comfortable transitioning into a female has a significant physical advantage in a sport or athletic event like the Olympics. Only an absolute idiot would try to take up a position to defend against biology. Millions of years of evolution aren't wrong. Men have denser bones, bigger muscles, all sorts of things about their body chemistry, including testosterone, that physically make them better at competitions like, I don't know, fighting. And it's interesting that so many of these people are like, well, it's somebody who was biologically a man, somebody who identified as a man, trained as a man, competed against men their entire life, wants to pummel women now. Imagine them saying, well, I have a problem with this. If the situation were reversed, if somebody who grew up biologically a woman was a woman their entire life and decided to get in the ring in the MMA and fight biological men and would end up getting put in the hospital. It's curious that you don't see a lot of people championing that type of thing. This Fallon Fox character, if I remember correctly, crushed the skull of a woman she was competing against. I mean, somebody who is biologically a man competing against somebody who is biologically a woman. What could go wrong? It is absolute. If you want to be supportive of transgender people, good for you. I am too. But don't for a second think that their physiology doesn't give them advantages in sports. I have the same. Look, you want to compete in sports? Awesome. But I am not going to support somebody who has lived their entire life until recently as a man, taking some hormones and then breaking all the women's world records. That's not how it works. So in defense of Ronda Rousey's statement, I believe what she said was factually correct, and I stand behind her 100%. The reason they don't like Ronda Rousey is because she has been an outspoken fan of meritocracy, and when the feminists tried to use her as a pawn, she stood up against them and said, yeah. If you remember the time when people were like, well, aren't you mad, Ronda Rousey, that male fighters make more money than female fighters? To which she replied, if I remember correctly, yeah, more people watch the male fighters. More sponsors are here for the male fighters. That's why they make more money. And then she promptly laughed in the face of modern day feminism. But that won't stop people from drudging up. In a 2013 video that she shared, one she had, of course, apologized for. I figured asking questions and doing research is more patriotic than blindly accepting what you're told, she said in a reply on Twitter. The following day, she made another tweet saying that she never meant to hurt or insult anyone and that she was sorry if people were offended. But as social justice has always proven, you never apologize because they never accept it. And we can see proof positive, as she goes on to say, but it doesn't stop her sounding like a corporate BS apology bot. Taking her comments regarding Fallen Fox, Fox is the first openly transgender MMA fighter in the sport's history and has undergone reassignment surgery in 2006, but received pushback against the idea that she could compete against women. UFC President Dana White stated that he did not believe Fox should be allowed to fight other women. Former NFL defensive tackle and MMA fighter Matt Mitrione called Fox a lying, sick, sociopathic, disgusting freak. Now, not a fan of that terminology. I don't think you should. I mean, look, if people want to be transgender, that's cool. What's wrong with that? They're not hurting anybody until they're hurting people, until they want to win all the female records. I mean, what's to stop someone just saying, hey, you know what? I want my name in the record books. Not to say that, you know, that this Fox lady, Fallen Fox, isn't legit, but if you lived your life as a man until 2006 and now you want to pummel women in the ring, no, not going to happen. Sorry, not sorry. To go on to say, she can try hormones, chop her junk off, but it's still the same bone structure a man has, Rousey said, which I agree with. It's an advantage, and I don't think it's fair. She also commented that she was glad the UFC didn't straight cut Mitrione for his comments, although those comments are pretty spicy. That she think the stars Ronda Rousey got the pronouns right, I guess. I didn't write anything sooner because I was lazy. I mean, because I thought that maybe I wouldn't have to be the one writing this, as a piece was in the middle of being edited. I've been writing this over the course of 2 days. My peer, Danielle, who cares, at Waypoint, published the same an article about Rousey's involvement, which is heartening. Still, I wish I didn't have to be queer folks speaking up. Where are our allies on this? Well, you know what? You can support the LGBTQ community, but also support science. I think if you talk to most rational folks in the LGBT community, and you said, hey, do you think this somebody who is biologically a man for 90% of their life should be beating up women who have been women biologically their entire lives? And I guarantee you, overwhelming majorities of them will agree with you. What does this have to do with Mortal Kombat? Nothing. She doesn't write a single dang thing about it. This is just a hit piece against Ronda Rousey appearing on Kotaku. It's disgusting. None of this has anything to do with Mortal Kombat 11. You can even see it in the comments. I was really on board with you reading the headline, but I was really concerned with those things you mentioned in the article. I wasn't really concerned with things you mentioned. I just think she's a bad voice actor and gave a very bland performance. I think that's more of a valid criticism for her to not be an MK because it pertains to the game. And the mask slips. Yeah, I definitely rather focus on the fact that she liked a thing implying that grieving parents' pain was false, and the fact that she's not the best, she's not a best voice actor. Okay, so you admit you have absolutely no interest in actually critiquing Ronda Rousey's performance in Mortal Kombat 11. You have no interest at all in talking about Mortal Kombat 11. You are only interested in talking about SJW BS. And you can see Sophia Narwitz somebody who is, I hope, I'm sure she's open about it, but she's also trans, coming to Rousey's defense and saying, Rousey is not transphobic for not wanting to fight trans women. There's a valid debate to be had around trans participants in sports, especially as it pertains to physical advantages. And to label those having objections as transphobic helps absolutely no one. In short, screw off Kotaku. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. There are a lot of critiques you can have for Ronda Rousey, none of which are things she did 10 years ago on Twitter or her opinions as an athlete about other athletes. But, back in, here we have her cohort happened to publish the same article on the same day, right? Isn't that interesting? 46 minutes ago, she wrote the exact same article. It's almost like games journalists collude to smear people. Ronda Rousey has no business being an MK11. Rousey is a noted MMA pioneer and WWE star, but is also a transphobe. You're not transphobic if you talk about biology. Is that how the SJWs do it? I don't. This is like maddening. Now, Waypoint, of course, is more not necessarily a video game site. They are a site that leeches off video game culture to talk about politics, but you could probably say the same thing about Kotaku. And why now? I'm having a blast playing Mortal Kombat 11, and there we have it. Always, this time, literally in the first sentence. Like I've always said, if the person has to proclaim in the first paragraph or two that they love video games, then you know they're a liar. As I said in the podcast last week, I suspect that MK functions for me much the way pro wrestling does for other people. It's crazy costume drama with no pretense in reality, featuring larger-than-life characters and fighting that bears no resemblance to the real thing. It's just wonderful, campy, colorful nonsense, and it's been a lot of fun to play. I'm sure you're having loads of fun, gamer. But two complicating factors are getting in the way of my wholehearted recommendation. Gasp! What could they be? The allegations of terrible work practices at the studio, but you bought it. How come you bought it? And how come you're giving the thing press? That's interesting. And the casting of Ronda Rousey as Sonya Blade. Wow. Breaking news, everybody. Like so many women who train and compete in combat sports, I sure had a journey with Rousey. I'm not the first to espouse complicated opinions about her. She was a pioneer for women in MMA, the first American Olympic medalist in judo, and the superstar that made competing in the MMA at the highest levels not only viable, but possible and attractive for women. Yeah, but it's not enough, is it? It's not enough because Rousey's not woke enough for you. She was perfect when she was you could use her as an example, but the second she goes off script and has her own opinion, now we must disavow. I used to watch her takedown game with years later. Grappling is at the side of the sport, and I've embraced it fully, and it's now my complete focus in training and competition. I came to grappling and MMA much later than I would have liked. It's intense. Okay, so again, where are we talking about Mortal Kombat? Where are we talking about Mortal Kombat? She also delivers a terrible performance in Mortal Kombat 11 in a world where voice actors are given miles and miles of banana pants scenery, chewing lines to indulge in. She sounds as if she put in as much passion as she does in brushing her teeth. It's stunt casting, but importantly, bad stunt casting, and sticks out in the cutscenes that are otherwise a lot of fun. Okay, fine. That, you can say, is a valid critique. What is the rest of this? What is the rest of this? Let's examine some of Rousey's worst sins. So she made the MMA attractive and viable for like millions of... Well, first of all, she helped popularize MMA. She made the women's division of MMA legitimate and popular, or at least helped in that regard. She was a superstar. But let's look at these two things she did that I didn't like. At one time, regarding Fallon Fox, a professional fighter who happens to be a trans woman. No, it's a biological man who wants to compete against biological women. Again, I have no problem with this. I have no problem with trans people. But when we want to get into sports, we are going to disagree. And that's okay. She definitely tweeted out a piece of tasteless trutherism. She later apologized for that one, but the damage was done. Rousey had used her massive platform irresponsibly, and the case for her comments on Fox to accept and relay downright hate. What are you doing with your platform? You are using it to bring down another woman, a woman who has done more for your proclaimed favorite sport than you ever have, or probably any woman before her ever has. I mean, you could critique. There are so many other women fighters that would have drawn to who aren't terrible transphobes. You're not a transphobe if you use biology to back up an argument when we're talking about physical competition. There are most trans people would agree with that, I imagine. How about Angela Overkill Hill, a UFC fighter who has taken her own love for the game? Well, guess what? Here's why. Never heard of her. Only hardcore MMA fans know her. Ronda Rousey is a worldwide superstar. That's why, you clown. This is games journalism at an all new level. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.